And I just turned around and I hauled ass out of there. I was done. I wasn't dealing with that.
The hypocrisy of the cult is one of the things that turned me away the quickest.
When I turned my headlights on, it turned and looked at us, and one of the things I remember the most were the eyes were glowing red.
I see an orb of light. It is just circling these steps like it is waiting for me.
And he begins to tell them that he saw a UFO. They're basically like, what are you talking about? That's 7 foot up on a tree, peeking around it, and that's where I saw the top of the muzzle, nose, and the eyes. As soon as I made eye contact with this thing, it felt like death.
Welcome back to Tinfoil Tales. I'm your host, Brandon Wright. Tonight's episode, we're going to be joined by my guest, Bob. Bob reached out to me about an experience he had back in 1970. Kind of caught my attention. So looking forward to talking with Bob. But before we bring him on, though, if you've ever had an experience or a story you'd like to share and you'd like to be on an episode of Tinfoil Tales, please send an email to tinfoiltalespodcast@gmail.com or go to tinfoiltales.com and go to the contact section. If you'd like to help the podcast out, please share it around. Word of mouth helps the podcast grow. You can also help by leaving a 5-star rating and review wherever you listen to Tinfoil Tales at. If you're like me and don't like all the ads, make sure to check into the Patreon. It helps support the podcast, and it also gets rid of all those ads for you. It's only $1.99 a month, but you get early access to all the episodes, so up to 2 months early. There's no ads, and there's also exclusive content. So make sure to check into the Patreon. Look into the show notes for that. Make sure to follow me on all the social media. And if you're interested in wearing some Tinfoil Tales gear, make sure to reach out to me. I'm sure we can get it arranged. But we're going to go ahead now and bring Bob on and dive into the conversation. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. I'd like to take this time to welcome my guest tonight, Bob. Thanks for coming on here and talking to me.
Thank you, sir.
Would you like to let the audience know a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm 61 years old. I'm a Christian, a musician, a thinker, a writer. I grew up in East Central Illinois, real close to Indiana, and that's the main story we're going to talk about tonight.
I remember when I first got in contact with you, I think you said it was Danville, Illinois. Is that correct?
That is it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's not too terribly far from the state line. I mean, it's not close to where I'm at, but it's still not terribly far away.
No, the Indiana state line was maybe a mile and a half out my front door.
Mm-hmm. So that is, I think the trains, is there a train depot that runs through there?
There was an old train depot in Danville, and it was shut down when I was a teenager. And it was all hollowed out and such, and trains would drive the tracks around it, but the depot wasn't used for anything anymore. So as teenagers back in the late 70s, that was a hangout for some of us rougher ones.
I feel like, and I forget where it's at. I know there's a place because the depot is actually in the town that I live in for up here. And I thought one of the other stops for Illinois, I thought they said it was Danville, but there maybe is another town. I may be mistaken, but anyways.
Well, there might be something of that nature now in Champaign. A lot of the industry moved that direction over the decades to Champaign.
Yeah, it might be. So I was offered a job to be a conductor. This is about 10 or so years ago. I was going to be running the tracks, and then I didn't want that lifestyle of living on the railroad tracks. So I didn't take that job. But one of the things they talked about was one of the stops was over in Illinois. Basically go from Illinois to Detroit, Michigan. Those would be the routes that I would be running. I was like, yeah, I don't know about all that. So,
a lot of cold walking.
Yep. That is the one thing you stop and you got to walk the whole cart to check everything. I was like, yeah, I don't know if I want to be doing all that for all those hours. Well, if you want to dive on into it, we can probably get started.
Okay. This account is it happened when I was 7 years old, 1970. We lived in the country southeast of Danville, Illinois. As I said, pretty close, just basically across a large cornfield from the Indiana state line. Behind the house was our woods, which joined to other properties. And if you went into the woods, you could stay under the canopy all the way to the Vermilion River, about 12 miles as crow flies. And you could follow the Vermilion River down to the Wabash River, and then on down. You could basically get from my house to Texas and only have to come out of the woods to cross a river or cross the street every once in a while. So who knows what could be moving around in all that. And various of my brothers had seen different things over the years. But I was young and I wasn't familiar with all that at the time. My brothers were working in the garage, changing a motor out in the car or something on the other side of the house. I was in the bedroom going to sleep, roughly about 10:45 at night, and the room dimly lit up. So I rolled over to see what's going on, and something was at the window, and I looked at it, and it was a creature. It was lit up, presented as white, and it looked over at me, then it looked back around the room, then it disappeared. I did not see it walk away. It simply disappeared. Now, I had not even heard of Bigfoot at the time, and over the decades, I never really associated it with Sasquatch, because I've always thought of Sasquatch as something like a gorilla in the biological sense. My son and I, a few years back, were at a friend's house, and we were watching YouTube stuff he was pulling up for fun at my friend Chet's house, and he pulled up this video from Pennsylvania. And this lady had shot this video of this thing at her window, and it was nearly identical to what I saw. And while we were looking at it, my son, who was about 9 years old at the time, looked up at me and said, "Dad, you've got to tell people." So I started letting people know what I saw there. Nobody else saw anything that night, and I had no interest in the subject because I didn't know anything about the subject. This was 1970, and word wasn't, they hadn't made all the documentaries and stuff like that at the time, so it wasn't common knowledge, especially to a 7-year-old.
Right. Those times, too, were the communication like we have today. There was no internet. There was no groups of social media where everyone could communicate. Back then, it was all just almost in person or over a telephone.
Yeah, one phone for everybody in the house with a 10-foot coil cord on it hanging on the kitchen wall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
maybe it was better.
There wasn't, probably, there wasn't 500 to 600 different channels of stuff out there either on TV. So the information was very limited back in those days.
Yeah, I wrote an article a few years back about that. When you've got 500 channels on TV, you can't find anything to watch. But when you grew up with an antenna that you had to go out and turn every time you changed channels, you always had something to watch.
I can honestly agree with that. I have all these channels from satellite, and it seems like only one channel ever really gets watched, and that's whatever the kids are watching. So it's usually cartoons.
How long have you been married?
Currently 5 years.
Okay. Did you spend a lot of time in the single world before you were married?
No, I was married. I was married previously, but I haven't had kids. This is first time I've ever had kids within the last 5 years, 5 to 6 years.
Hmm. Well, where I'm going, I'm not trying to get too personal or something. Just because I think you'll recognize it. When you're around a lot of single people, when you're single and you're out there amongst all the singles in today's world, there's 100 times more singles than there were a couple of decades ago. And nobody can ever find anybody to get married to. And they got all these options and they can't settle on one of them. Just like the TV set, they got 500 channels and they can't find anything to watch.
Yeah, that does seem kind of correlated. I can't
Yeah.
say much because I didn't have a whole lot of single window. I was married previously for 10 years. I was with that person for almost 14, and now I've been with my current wife for over 6 years now. So
Yeah. Wish you well.
I guess I wasn't much for browsing.
The quality goes down when the number of channels go up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm definitely the happiest I've been. We've got a great family, got great kids, so no complaints from me.
Excellent. I'm happy too with my situation. My son, he's 20 now, and he makes movies. He doesn't have a big budget, but he takes what he has and he makes movies. He's trying to finish his first feature film whenever that comes out. But made an interesting Halloween thing a year or two ago that he just grabbed me one Saturday night and said, "Come on, we're going." So we went out in the front yard and I had no idea what we were doing. And he said, "Okay, you do this and say these lines." Well, who's the character? And he wouldn't tell me. So we shot it, and it's called Lucid, and I posted on Facebook. It's a 8 or 9 minute Halloween film. It's fun.
Mm-hmm.
We filmed it in the front yard. But
I used to do stuff like that when I was a kid. That's all. To be 100% honest, that was one of the things I always wanted to do, was be a movie director or act in movies. Clearly, life took a different turn because during the day, I run construction projects, and then at nighttime, here I am out in a little lofted cabin interviewing people that have weird experiences. So,
well, it's easy enough to make them now since they've got these programs that you can edit stuff to just, it's crazy how the details you can edit with now, just sitting in your room, sitting on a laptop, you can, do some pretty good stuff. But,
completely off topic of the movie, but the whole filming aspect, I've been wanting to start doing more documentary type stuff. Like, I want to go out and actually want to investigate certain areas, but I want to record it and maybe release it if there's actually something worth releasing. But I'm kind of one of those people, if I don't have anything worth seeing, if it's just a bunch of people walking or a couple of people walking around and there's really nothing interesting happening, I'm not going to release it because I get bored watching that type of stuff, so I'm not going to bore anyone else doing it. It's just how I go about it.
Yeah, I agree. There are some pretty well-known people that are making paranormal, Bigfoot sort of type documentaries, and most of what they've done the last couple of years is, as you described, walking through the woods, talking to the camera.
Yeah, that's not anything I'm interested in. If there's nothing that really goes on with it, then I just feel like it's not worth releasing, because if I'm going to be bored with it, I know everyone else will be too.
Did you see that it's a documentary called Mysterious Monsters? Peter Graves hosted back in the mid-'70s. Have you ever seen that?
No, I'm not familiar with that.
If you simply do a Google for Peter Graves and Bigfoot, you'll probably find it. It is the best Bigfoot documentary that's ever been made. I highly recommend it. It's right on the lines with In Search Of, but it's better than the episodes of In Search Of because it's over an hour long and it presents a lot more. In Search Of, 25-minute long episodes, they're kind of condensed in where they could go. But it's along that line. It's about the information, not the people on the camera. And
I shouldn't say this, but by the time this one airs, it'll already be over with. But I think a lot of these shows nowadays are not so much about the information. It's more or less for the entertainment factor. So everyone that I see that are hosts of these shows are out investigating and everything else. For me, is just kind of like I think they're just there to collect the paycheck and just be on camera. They're not actually there to actually find evidence of anything.
yeah,
But
I agree. And that's why I tend not to watch them. I've heard of a couple of them that have been out for a few seasons, and I've not seen a single one of them. Finding Bigfoot
I'm
was worse than. I would rather watch Gilligan's Island, and I love Gilligan's Island, but it's hard to watch as an adult. And I would rather watch
right.
Gilligan's Island all day than one episode of Finding Bigfoot.
That's why I said I shouldn't say this, but by the time this actually gets released, it'll already be past. But I'm going to be at this year's Cryptid Con here in the next couple of weeks, and a lot of these people from those shows are going to be there too. I have a booth
Mhm.
set up, or I'll have a booth set up, and they'll have their stuff too. So I'm probably going to talk with some of them, but it's like my aspect of what I find entertaining is not really what they're doing. I don't even watch those shows. I tried to, I just can't get into them because I just feel like it's all staged and stupid. If I'm going to go out looking for a Bigfoot, I'm pretty sure if it's out there, me banging on a tree and then yelling, it's just going to
Yeah,
go the opposite direction. I think it's going to know the difference between me and one of them.
yeah. When you hear somebody banging a tree back at you, it's probably that other Bigfoot hunter on the other side of the woods.
Right. So I don't,
Yeah.
if they're able to communicate or anything like that, I don't think they're doing it with that aspect. I think you're just allowing everyone else and everything else to know exactly where you are and to where to avoid.
I wrote an article a couple years ago because I was so tired of what you're describing. So I sat down and wrote, and it's very, very obvious and simple. And it includes kind of the perspective of some people out there, but it goes farther. Bigfoot is not annoyed by the squirrels because squirrels are part of the woods. He's not annoyed by bobcats or the bugs or snakes crawling by because they are part of the environment. If you want to go out and look for Bigfoot, the first thing you do is get 3 or 4 sets of clothes and walk out in the woods several miles away from any road so there's no diesel smell or anything. Hang them up there and let all the human scent get out of them. Let them hang there for a year in the woods. And then wrap them in plastic and pack them up. Go out to whatever area you're going to. It needs to be probably at least 100 acres with nobody in it. And when you get out of your vehicle, take off, change into the first set of clothes, and leave behind everything. And by the way, for 2 weeks before you go on this venture, eat wild edible foods. It's easy to do. I do it all the time. I've got a pot of soup in there right now that's full of wild edible foods. It's got burdock, and who would have thought of eating burdock? Burdock's good eating. Wild mustard and various other things, but those are natural things, and they don't have chemicals in them, and they don't make you smell like mankind. But eat wild edibles for at least 2 weeks. And note, you just skip deodorant. Your family can put up with it. Just skip deodorant for a couple of weeks. And then when you get out of your vehicle, change into the clothes, the first set of clothes that you had hanging in the woods, and take no plastic, because plastic's made from oil and plastic has an aroma. Nothing plastic. Don't take a camera, because it's not about recording it for your ego, for everybody else, because your ego projects, and he can sense that just like a stray dog can sense what you're up to when you're trying to capture it. You're out there to experience the moment. You can tell people, they'll believe you or not. As we've seen, even if you have video, they're going to believe you or they're not. So skip that. Don't worry about the people who aren't there. Go for yourself. Go out in the woods, hike in a mile or two, stop and build a campsite. stay at this campsite. Do not look for Bigfoot. Just be about doing what you need to do at the campsite. Eat the wild edible food that you find within 100 yards of that campsite. Stay there a week. Then change into the second set of clothes that has been wrapped in plastic and travel to a second campsite a mile or two away. Do the same thing there. You're losing human civilization scent as you're going, and you're also becoming part of the woods because you're focusing on your everyday need to do things like your shelter and your food. You're not presenting an agenda. I've got to find Sasquatch. And he can sense that, just like my cats know. When I'm going to go give them a flea bath, they know what I'm up to before I touch them.
Right.
So Bigfoot knows that. And you're not showing any of that agenda. You are simply doing your business in the woods like the squirrels and the snakes are. So you just go about that at the second campsite. And then after a week, you change into the third set of clothes and move to a third campsite and keep doing this. And you just keep moving between them. This whole venture should take you a few months. But what you have done is you have in that way become part of the woods. You're different, but you're not projecting by your aroma or by your agenda any intent to disturb anything. And Sasquatch being around there, he will be curious about you and he will come to investigate you. And if he wants, you'll see him. You know, that's pretty simple. But if you don't have a camera so that you record it so you can show everybody what you saw and feed your ego, you don't want to do that. What do you think?
I 100% agree. I just don't think anyone's ever going to really invest that amount of time into the research for it. That's a big task for one person to want to do that.
Well, they're wasting a lot of money on something they know is going to fail because they won't do that.
Oftentimes, I don't think shows like Finding Bigfoot really want to actually find Bigfoot. They have to keep doing the show because once they find Bigfoot, they're no longer finding him. So then they have nothing else to do.
That's
so
right.
all these shows and all these documentaries, I feel like they never want to find much. They just want to dangle a little bit here and there to keep people coming back so they can keep making more and more and more.
Money, corporation.
That is the one thing that I will say too is I feel like no matter what we can determine or whatever people discover, I don't think there's going to be a whole lot out there for anyone out there to come out and produce the evidence unless they're able to get around all of the money aspect to it. Because for me, I feel like there's too much money involved in a lot of this stuff. Not so much the cryptids, but just in general. If there's proof of a Sasquatch or whatever these creatures could be, what would that do to like the forestry and like the forest industry, like the lumber industry, like all sorts of things? It would uproot a whole lot of stuff in the way we live and the way we do things. So I think there's a big reason as to why we don't hear much about it and why everyone kind of writes everything off, because there's a lot of money that's being made and they don't want to uproot that by having some sort of creature out there interfering with it.
Which is why for the most of us, tend to think that official people have known Sasquatch was there for the last 60, 70 years at least, and hide it for the reason you described.
Yeah.
And that's sad. It will take something extraordinary for him to become known, because there are accounts of somebody hitting a Sasquatch and killing it on the road, and the officials came, took away the body, and then told him they were going to file charges against him if he ever told anyone. So that's happened a number of times. So as you say, they don't want it known. Logging industry,
there's all sorts of things that tie back into the money system. So now
I'm so not
I was going to
interested
ask,
in that. Go ahead.
I was going to ask you, like, when you first saw this, you said you were 7.
Yes.
Did you honestly think at that time that it was like a because you said it just kind of vanished.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts now compared to then? Like, what did you think it, like, from then to now, what do you think it was?
Well, the very simple thing is, as we grow up, we get sophisticated, and our thinking on a subject matter can simply get more sophisticated, or it can mature. And those are two different animals. It's kind of like, when you get married, you have an idea of it. Many people, 3 or 4 years into marriage, their thoughts on marriage get more sophisticated. Oh yeah, but they still end up with a mess, or they get more mature and their marriage grows. You follow me on this? In the same way, I think my thoughts have matured on it. And I'll say right off the top that I don't know what it was. I have an idea of what category it falls into. And that would be, let's use the word paranormal. Alongside normal is what that means.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Supernatural means beyond the natural. Okay. Those are actually bad words for us to use. If we use the word extra normal, I think that would be closer. And this is why. Several months ago or so, I was driving down the road, going to pick my wife up from someplace, and I'm going down the country road. I live in the country. I can't stand the idea of living in a city. It's just, and I'm driving down the country road, and my headlights are on. It's 10 o'clock at night or so, midnight or something, and I'm looking straight forward. And as I'm passing a mailbox, I become aware, my peripheral vision has just barely turned my head enough to see him. Standing right next to the mailbox that I passed was probably a 12-point buck. And it was right there, and it was 3 feet from my driver's door. And I didn't see him in my headlights. I didn't know he was there. Didn't have any idea that he was there because he wasn't in my headlights. He wasn't in my purview. How many things, but he's part of the natural world, and he's there all along, and I would not have seen him. How many things are part of the natural world and are there all along? And we're just not aware of them because in our normal life and civilization, we go to work, we go to the store, we come home, we go to school, we do this, we do that. We have our routines, and we have our eyes, our purview is fixed in a certain way, and there are things right off the side of the road all day long, and we don't see them. Plants. We grow some things in our garden here, and it's pretty cool because if a bug gets into one plant in a row and starts chewing on it, all the other plants in that row start producing a toxin for that specific bug. How is that? How did they know the first bug was being eaten? The first plant was being eaten. How did they know that? Not only, how did those other plants know what bug was eating the first plant? Plants don't have a brain. How do they know? And that goes on every day around us, and we're oblivious to it. It's not supernatural. It's not paranormal. It's normal. It's natural. It's just outside of our purview. And I think Sasquatch is natural. Even if he has unusual abilities that some people describe, he's part of the natural world. Maybe other things are part of the natural world too. I told you I'm a Christian, and there are people that want to write off Bigfoot and stuff like that. Somebody accused me of worshiping demons because I read stuff on Bigfoot, and that's silliness. That's childishness. the Irish people, Catholic Christian people, and they still understood the Fey world around them. It was part of the world around them. There's a lot of things probably around in our world that are just outside our purview. Extra normal, extra natural, not supernatural or paranormal, just outside our purview. I think the thing I saw is something in that category. There were other events. Like I said, my brothers talked about seeing things. They'd go back in the woods, and they were older than me, teenagers, and they'd go way down through the woods, many, many miles back there, and they saw many things that could not be described as normal in our purview. But they saw them, and I'm not going to just call somebody a liar because he's telling me about something that I've not seen. That reflects on my character. And it reflects on the character of everybody that says that what I saw at the window or Sasquatch isn't true. It reflects on their character when they just dismiss it out of hand. Well, you don't have pictures. Well, if I had pictures, you wouldn't believe the pictures. You would say they were fake. So I don't show you pictures. You don't matter. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I think
at the end of the day, you're not going to prove anyone one way or the other.
Yeah.
I think people are set in their own beliefs, and it's going to take one of them having their own experience, their own sighting of something to make them change that perspective. Because if someone doesn't have an experience, and I've said this before, it's really hard for people to talk about certain things because some of these events that they've had with encounters can be very traumatic for people. And a lot of people don't seem to understand that. And I didn't understand it at first either. But when you look at how people react to certain aspects, someone can't say they can relate to someone if they've never experienced it themselves. So if someone's talking about seeing something strange, it's hard for someone to come out and even talk about it because of the ridicule that usually comes with it. So trying to explain that you saw something to someone else, and if they're already in the stance of they don't believe in this type of stuff, just because you told them that, they're not going to automatically be like, oh, it must be real. I don't feel like there's that connection with people. Like they don't have the ability to just change their belief instantaneously. Because even for me, you mentioned being Christian. I was raised in a Pentecostal church. None of this stuff is real. So for me, there's no such thing as ghosts. There's no such thing as Bigfoot. There's no such thing as aliens. Like none of that stuff was real. Only what's in the Bible is real. And for that, it's like, what could this be then? Because they're not real. And then I've had some stuff happen. I've seen some stuff. There's stuff that goes on. I'm not a religious person in the sense of I don't go to church anymore. I'm not like, I have my beliefs, but I think there's other things out there that's not just so much what the Bible tells us. So that's how I feel about things. So for me, it's like, I believe there's things out there. I don't know what it is, but I've also seen things. So it's like seeing is believing.
To a great degree. Sometimes you can see and still not believe though. So there still remains a gap between seeing and believing. Something else must happen to believe. The Bible doesn't give us it wasn't written to us as a history book or a geological textbook. It has a reason for saying what it says in a context, and it addresses that there are many things that it doesn't say that just aren't pertinent to the reason it was written. That if it were John told us that if you tried to write everything down, you couldn't fill the world with enough books. So I would say it's really not any kind of contradiction. It's just there are things in the world that were understood that didn't pertain to what the Bible was written to tell us about. But I had a thought there a second ago, and it happens when you get over 50. But many Christians through history have understood these things. Ghosts, we can't say that ghosts don't exist. I've seen things, you've seen things, I've known multiple people who've seen things. What we cannot say is we cannot assume that ghosts then have to be people that have died. That's an easy conclusion to come to, but there's absolutely no evidence to say that. It might resemble in some way that person. The crazy thing is, many people that have seen ghosts, and many times you see on these documentaries about it, they talk about this lady in this white dress coming down the stairs or something. Why would a ghost need to have clothes on?
Right.
You know,
I've actually thought that too.
You know, so is it something else? Why aliens? The least probable explanation of a UFO, UAP, is aliens from another planet. It takes, I wrote on this several years ago, it takes approximately 500,000 times the amount of energy used in the United States every year to send a rocket with 10 astronauts to Proxima Centauri. That's the nearest star to us. 500,000 times the amount of energy used in the United States in a whole year. That's a whole lot of energy. So anybody coming from somewhere else is not going to come here for a Sunday drive. They're not going to show up and then pop back like a church mouse sticking its head out of the hole and he sees the cat and runs back in. They're going to come and they're going to do what they came to do and get it done, whether that's to give us this wonderful technology some people think is going on, or to take over. Whatever their agenda is, they're going to just come and do it, because that is the only thing that's even reasonable logically. So rule out aliens on another planet and look at other possibilities of what might be causing the phenomenon. UAP is a better description, unidentified aerial phenomena, because we don't know that it's flying. We don't know that it's really an object. All we know is that we are seeing it, and it appears to be in the air. So unidentified, and we don't know what it is. Unidentified aerial phenomenon. It's a phenomenon. It's something we're looking at. We don't really know any more details than that. It is elite to go from there to say aliens. So I think that could be very well part of the natural world around us in some way that we just don't know, because we're children in civilization. And we haven't grown up as much as our scientists wish us to think. Maybe that's just part of the world around us that is not in our purview.
When it comes to UAP, I've often been thinking here lately, again, I've said this before too, I don't feel like there are aliens that are coming down here and picking random people all the time and doing whatever they're supposedly doing. Like, I can see both sides, I guess, because what do we do when we're out documenting animals? They'll find an animal, they'll tag it, like so say they find a great white shark. Oh, they pull it up out of the water, they tag it, they release it, and they try and document what it does. Mm-hmm. So I understand that aspect where people claim that these things come down here and they take them in their ship, they do something to them, they put something under their skin, and then they release them, and then they come back periodically and check on them. To me, that sounds very much like what we do. But if something has the ability to travel through light years of space, why are they doing it in such a weird, secretive manner and picking the most random of people to do that to? Like, unless they're just trying to study us, then I guess I could see that concept. But like you mentioned, like the amount of energy it takes just for us to get somewhere, if they have the capabilities of producing their own energy, I don't know if it'd be anti-gravity or antimatter or whatever, however their stuff could possibly be. It's kind of weird. But I've been hearing a lot lately of with these hearings they've been having, they've tossed out interdimensional. I thought that was very strange that of all things, this lady from Congress mentioned interdimensional. It's almost like they want you to think that. So I've always said, though, I think a lot of the stuff that they're like that they've seen and everything, they released the information on. I feel like it's actually from here. I just don't think they might not know from where, like how with who's in control of it or whatever. But I think the phenomena is actually originating from here, not from trillions of miles away.
I agree. And here in some way, that's the only, where did we see it? Here. So why would we make the leap to think that it came from somewhere else? Well, I don't know where it came from or where it's going. All I know is when I was standing there on that Saturday afternoon, I saw it in the sky to the west. It was here. So the rest is to assume, to make leaps in thinking. Walter Cronkite, you remember him? Are you old enough to remember him?
Yeah, I know who he is. I'm 40 years old, so.
Okay. He was the voice when I was a kid. I'd be sitting in the front room when he'd come on TV on CBS on a weeknight, and he would talk about the latest news from Vietnam. And at the time, I had two brothers over in Vietnam. So he was the voice at the time. He's also was the control of the narrative. One thing people in the government want to do is control the narrative. So when I'm watching, and I made a video about this a couple years ago, about the interesting thing about how many movies and TV shows came out about a pandemic in the 5 years before COVID. It's awful strange. Some of them would come out and only last one season, then they'd go away. Why? Why did they make these? You know, that's a curiosity. I mean, but that's been all my life. There have been things like that. Walter Cronkite trying to control telling you what you're supposed to believe. CERN talking about interdimensional stuff at the same time as people in Washington. The question is not whether it's true, it's why are they telling us this? Why do they want us to think this way? Why do they want to put these thoughts in our head? It made me, as an adult, watch TV quite differently than everybody else, because I watch to see what they're saying about the narrative. What are they trying to make us tell us we're supposed to believe? You know.
I don't, like I mentioned earlier, I don't even watch TV at this point. Like, I might watch some sports, but other than that, I don't really pay a whole lot of attention to what's on TV these days.
If I could find a good channel that had jousting, I'd probably watch that for sports. But,
I still like my football, my basketball, but anymore it's just I don't know. My kids play sports. I see them playing it, so that's about what we do. I just I go to work, I deal with my family stuff, and then go watch my kids play sports, and then at nighttime I come out here. It's my little escape from reality, I guess.
Yeah, I got a buddy who he's in security, and he gets home at night and he does the thing, sitting there smoking a cigar, and talking about different things. Archangel Ministries thing. I don't know if you've ever seen his stuff.
Mm-mm.
He's kind of connected to helping people escape sex trafficking and stuff like that. So it's sometimes it gets pretty intense on there. I like intensity. I like people being authentic and not holding back. Sometimes they're faking it and they're putting it on to get hits on their YouTube page, but I like authenticity. I'd rather have real.
Right. That is the one thing that I can actually say about what I do. I know my word don't really mean anything to anyone, but if anyone knows me, this is me. Like, I don't do anything different. Like, I'm not even an outgoing person, so everyone thinks it's kind of weird that I even do a podcast where I talk to people, because usually if I'm around a bunch of people, I don't say much. But if anyone listens to my show, I don't do a whole lot of talking on the show. I try and let guests do most of the talking because that's just how I prefer to do it. Some podcasts, the host wants to talk all the time. And that's not me.
And I'm the guest, and I'm feeling like I'm talking too much.
No, you're making my job easier. I don't want to say a whole lot, so.
Well, if you go out in the world and out in the woods and you see Bigfoot and you're going to run scared, had my boss, we were driving to a job site and the subject of Bigfoot came up and stuff, and he talked about being scared and running and stuff like this. So why? Give me an account where Bigfoot killed somebody. Just give me an account of it. You don't have to be afraid. He didn't want to hear any of it. He wanted to be afraid. He wanted to be small. And I say, there's no reason. It's a choice. Fear is a fact. Afraid is a choice. Fear is to warn you that there's danger, and then you take logical steps to deal with the danger. But you don't have to make the choice to be afraid. When you make that choice, your brain wiring changes, and it shuts down your frontal lobes, and you cannot process the thought of what you need to do in that moment. It's like I've taught children about it. Being afraid, it's a 3-step thing. Number 1, don't be emotional. 2, think about what it is you need to do. 3, get it done. Don't be emotional. Think about what you need to do. Get that done. Focus on that. And I have seen, even in a 4-year-old, take what I said to heart and get stung by wasps and not freak out. And you get stung by a wasp, it's like getting hit with a hammer repeatedly.
I thought I was getting electrocuted when it happened.
And go to his mom and say, it was my son when he was 4 years old. He got a wasp get under his shirt and it stung him 7 times on the chest. And I told him, I got home from work and found out about it. And he was pretty freaked out about it even still. And I told him about it. I told him the 1, 2, 3 thing. He's 4 years old. 6 months later, he's out in the backyard and he got stung on the hand. And he went and found mom out in the backside of the garden, several hundred feet away. And he walked up to her, plain, no excitement. Mom, a wasp stung me. And then he was done doing what he needed to do. Then he started bawling. But that whole time, it was a wasp sting, like getting hit in the hand with a ball-peen hammer repeatedly. So, but he applied that. We don't have to be afraid. You see Bigfoot, there could be a moment where something wonderful can happen. I would love to meet a mountain lion in the woods. I'd love to meet a black bear in the woods. It doesn't have to be a hostile situation. Probably the hostility would come from me. When you get afraid, you start emitting adrenaline, and animals can smell that. And that means danger to them. So they go to deal with the danger. But if you don't emit adrenaline because you did not get afraid, maybe they'll be curious of you like you're curious of them. And you could be like that photographer in Africa who laid down under a tree to take a nap, and this cheetah came up and laid down next to him and went to sleep with him. Why not? Maybe that's just the natural way it ought to be. Doesn't have to be hostile.
We are going to be taking a trip to Gatlinburg this weekend.
Mm-hmm.
And I've already told my family if a bear happens to walk out, which chances are it won't happen, but if there is, it's like, I'm going to go out there too. And they're like, why? I was like, because how often am I ever going to get to see a wild bear in person? So it's not going to be in the woods, but if I happen to see a bear, I'm going to go out and see it. I guess if I get attacked by a random bear, then so be it. But it's my opportunity to go see a black bear.
Why not?
Yeah.
Magical things can happen.
Yeah.
It could be.
I guess worst
something.
I would say worst thing I could have my
perspective.
kids video record it, and if I get attacked by it, I become a famous video. I don't know, but that seems to be the thing. People doing dumb things make the big click thing. If I want to go that route, I guess.
15 minutes of fame, they used to call it.
Right. Nowadays, girls say some random things, and now they get their own podcast and millions of dollars because they talked about spitting. So that's the world. The world we live in today is baffling to me.
Do you have anything in you that says you wish that an asteroid would hit and solve all this?
I think that would be daily. Sometimes I honestly feel, and this is random, but sometimes I feel like, has the world actually ended? We're all just in purgatory, like, because it's just gotten. It feels like it's gotten so worse and stupider, and it's just, I don't know.
But if you look at history, no
frustrating.
empire has lasted more than 250 years. And normally they tend to be, even if they're conquered by someone else, it was only after they were corrupted from the inside out, and which made them vulnerable to be conquered. America's 250, therefore, plus years old. So, and it's an empire. It's not a nation. It never was a nation. The people in Washington State don't see the world the same as a little boy growing up in East Central Illinois. The people in Hawaii cannot be part of the same nation I'm from because they certainly don't see the world the same way. We have an empire, and it can't last, and that's okay because that is history. We should think about not how to perpetuate the convenient things that we have, but how to build a civilization that we want and what to do after this ends. Because sooner or later, it's going to, because they all do. So it's nothing new. They all do. King Alfred the Great in Britain, his country was not England, it was Wessex. And it was about the size of 2.5 to 3 counties, what we would call counties today. He wanted all of England. He dreamed of it. It became all of England after the Battle of Hastings when William the Bastard took over and did horrible things to the British people. And they called it one country, but it never was, because the people that live in the area that was known as Northumbria are still different than the people that now live in the place that was once called Wessex. 2 different regions. New York is not the same as Mississippi. Different people. There will always be a tension between them just because there are different cultures. And trying to force them to be under one umbrella, calling them one nation, that there will always be that tension because they aren't. And at some point, it does come apart, and that's not a bad thing. That's just an organic thing. What are we going to do after? Why not look at a bright day after all that? How can we rebuild something beautiful? That's where I come from in politics. That's why I don't really care who wins the election. I really don't care. I tend to make fun of elections when they come around.
I don't understand how people turn a political party into their whole being. Like, everything that they post and everything that has to do with something is literally just some sort of political thing. So I was like, are you even a real person, or are you just a bot at this point? Because your whole identity is consumed by who you're wanting to vote for.
Mm-hmm.
Like, to me, I don't care. Like, I don't let it consume me. I don't even personally believe that, I shouldn't say this, I'll get flagged, but I don't believe that my one vote is really going to affect the outcome of either side. And there's like a 1 in a billion something percent chance that one vote really mattered. So it's like, I would rather not even choose one, the less of two evils is what they call it. Why do we have to even have that as the choice? Like, how do we get, it's like a laughing stock. How does this is the options? So I just, like I said, I hate politics.
Hugging your kids before you go to work every morning has more impact on the universe than what you do in the voting booth.
Right. I've tried to have that conversation with some people and they get mad at me. So I don't even try and go down that rabbit hole with some people because it's not worth the argument. They're, again, like I said earlier with the whole Bigfoot topic, they're so set in their ways that you're not going to open their mind to something different. So
psychologically, then, you have to ask the question about the majority of people in the Bigfoot world that are bent on convincing other people why they need to convince them. What is it in them that they need to convince people? It's kind of like back ages ago when people were selling Amway and your friend gets all into Amway and they're trying to, that's all they can talk about, and they're trying to convince you to buy this product and get into the business, signed up under them so they can make money off of you.
The big pyramid scheme.
Well, they have a need, and that's what the Amway Corporation did, was it played on a psychological event in their head. It makes them feel like a somebody because they have something to share. They have something other people don't have. And if they've always felt like less than average all their life, then all of a sudden they can be one of the upper class. They can be one of the in crowd now. And because they've never had that, they've always kind of had a little bit of envy for that in crowd, and they want to be part of it. So now they're selling Amway and they're going to be rich and they're going to have the yacht because they believe what they were told. But they're not. And nobody on the rich side of town, living in the big houses, sells Amway. It's always the people in the trailer courts. So in the same way, I think that applies to in the extra normal world. People find out about this and they know about it and they got to share it with everybody and they got to convince them. And it's not as drastic as selling Amway or Avon, but it's still that psychological need for me to be the one that convinced this person. If we can let go of that, because then we walk into the woods with that agenda, I'm going to get evidence so I can show it to people. And Bigfoot smells that agenda we're walking into the woods with. It's kind of like the stray dog. He's walking by your yard and you're standing there and you're talking to him and he's looking at you and you're walking out and you're going to pet him. He knows that's what you're going to do. If you're hiding a leash behind your back that you're going to put on his neck, he knows that and he runs from you because he can sense the difference. And
I was going to say, when it comes to the dog aspect of it, I have 2 dogs. And I try and stress this to my family. I was like, they sense your intent, like your energy. They feed off that. They know what you're thinking. So if they get riled up and you're trying to stop it, or you want the dog to come inside because he's out running around chasing a chicken and you want him to stop, if you go out there to try and get him, he's going to continue to run. Like they know what you're doing. Like they sense that. Like if your energy in here, if you're afraid because they're getting too rough with each other and think a dog fight's going to break out, you're being that energy that's feeding that though. Like if you start freaking out because they're playing rough and you think they're fighting, you're going to probably actually instigate the fight because they feed off your energy. So one of them's going to sense that, and all of a sudden they're going to go after the other one because they think the other one's bothering you. And I don't know. Sometimes it's like talking to the wall. No one listens to me, but I believe that's just how animals are. They sense things that we can't rationalize. Like it's just their abilities.
True with people too.
Mm-hmm.
Your child skins his knee, and you come up, and your child's sitting there crying, and he skinned his knee. The worst thing you could do is run up all frenetically and make a big to-do of it, because that's the thing, and the child's going to explode into full-blown bawling. And we know that, and it's exactly what you just described.
Mm-hmm. People say I'm a bad parent, but if the kid is not overwhelmingly hurt, the first thing I do is, like the other day, my kid was jumping on the bed. The whole monkey's jumping on the bed thing comes into play here. Flipped off the bed and landed on his head in my floor. So he's crying, and the first thing I say is, now we know why we don't jump on the bed. And then I get told not to be that way. Like, he's crying. I was like, well, I'm making a point. This is why you shouldn't be jumping on the bed. I'm not in there, oh, baby, coddling you. I'm going to tell you to stop jumping on the bed.
That old baby stuff is, no, you're right. You're right. Yeah, you do need to watch, but it's already done. So running up to them is not going to make a difference on the state of things with their neck. If you can see their arms and legs are moving, their neck ain't broke.
Right. The fact that he's up running around screaming and crying.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, we all did
that's
that
my
jumping
instinct. Yeah, I'm not. Now, the oldest accidentally burnt the cheek of my daughter, the 5-year-old, a couple weeks ago. They were she was curling her hair, and my daughter turned and she touched the curling iron. It put a burn on her cheek. So I freaked out over that because I thought it was going to like leave a horrible scar. But I didn't freak out like to her. I was more or less pissed off that happened. So I said, from now on, you're not curling her hair. She's 13. We're curling the 5-year-old's hair, and my 5-year-old turned and hit the curling iron. So, honest mistake, but I said, from now on, no. Like, luckily, it didn't really burn her that bad to where it's healed up now. You don't really notice it. So, my biggest concern was you have a big
hyaluronic acid in their system. So those things, it's just amazing how much they heal.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to tell you about an event I had several years ago. I was coming out of a shop, and it was pretty hot out, and there's a machine over there. So I walked over to get a Coke, and I put my dollar in and hit the button, and I looked down, and what comes out? Well, it wasn't a can. It wasn't a bottle. It was a turd. And I looked at that, and I looked at the machine, and I turned around to walk away. And when I turned around, there was an old man standing behind me with a dollar bill in his hand. And I said, man, you don't want to use that machine. You're going to lose your money, and all you're going to get is crap out of it. And then I walked past him and got my car and went home. Next week, I come driving by, and I was driving by that same shop, and I looked over, and that same old man is standing there in front of that machine, putting $1 in after another and getting crap out of it, getting a turd out of it. So I got out of the car and walked up, and I said, hey, man, remember me from last week? I just was thinking, and I bet you're a Christian that always votes Republican. And he looked at me and said, how did you know?
That is, might make some people annoyed with that one. But
don't waste your vote.
Right.
Vote for what you believe in, because the vote is a vow. If you don't really believe in the person you're going to pull the lever for, you're wasting your vote.
No. I voted the last time there was an election, I voted third party, and someone told me, like, you completely pointless of wasting your vote. Well, the next time I just won't vote. So I'm not going to Vote for something I don't believe in.
That's like saying you're going to marry this girl because that other girl is too ugly. This one's not as ugly as that one, so I'm going to marry her. That's voting for the lesser of two evils.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just don't do it. Just don't do it. People are caught up in this, in the projection of civilization that they see, and they can't understand around it. I tend to talk in terms of not having that projection and seeing things as they actually are. And what kind of world do we really want? And why don't we simply put our energies toward whatever kind of world we want and ask honest questions about what needs to happen for that to come to pass? Because it probably means we're going to have to give up many things that we find convenient. But that's okay. We will not get what we want if we don't give up those convenient little things. You live in Nebraska in 1870, and you get a letter from your aunt in upstate New York. How long did it take for that letter to get to you? 3 weeks?
Several days. Yeah.
Okay. Well, you're a farmer, so you read the letter, then you lay it on your desk, and you go out and you work in your field, and you'll come back and you'll read the same letter again the next day. And maybe then you'll start to write a return letter, and you might write a paragraph or two. And then you'll go back about your business for a day or two, come back, write a little more, and it'll take you a week of processing and thinking, of deep thinking and mature thinking in the state of several different emotions throughout the day. And you finally write the letter back to her. And you actually communicated. But you had the time to process it. When we get to fast texting and email and all that stuff all day long, there is no processing. And it hurts us as human beings. Can we give that up to be better people?
I think that is one of the downsides to humanity. We've gotten so used to the convenience of everything. What we're doing right now is having this conversation, like you mentioned before. Back in the old days, this would be a telephone in the kitchen. Now we're able to do it this way, and then now people are going to listen to our conversation, which I've always thought was also, at first, for a while, was a weird concept that people are interested in listening to other people have a conversation. But it seems to be the way the world has become. So I host a show where people listen to people like you and I have a conversation, but I think that it helps some people. So if I feel like I'm doing some sort of good, then the whole concept of podcast is, again, like, I'm not an outgoing person. I'm not a great communicator with people or whatever. Like, for me, I'm more of a observer. I like to stand in the corner and like watch everyone else. It sounds like a creepy thing, but like for me, I pick up on a lot of things. I see how people act. I see how they are. And that's how I would rather be. And doing this is out of my comfort zone. But at the same time, I feel compelled to do it, and I can't explain why. But
because you want to make a difference in the world, and it's a very direct and simple way to make a difference in the world.
I feel like if I can help just one person, which people have reached out to me and told me that. I've mentioned this before because I don't say a lot. I don't try and give myself a pat on the back. I try and be honest, and I try and be humble about things. Someone told me I'm doing the Lord's work. I was like, well, I don't necessarily see that, but to each their own. I don't I'm not out here preaching to anyone. I'm not here spreading gospel to anyone. I'm not here proving or disproving anything. I'm just letting people talk. So if that's doing good, then that's all I'm trying to do in the world. Just do good. And I've told that to anyone else. Like, I don't push any sort of religion or any sort of agenda or anything. I just want people to be good to each other. That's all I ask. I know it's hard for us to get to that point, but there's too much negativity and too much hate out there. I'd rather get past all the crap that gets sorted through here and just try and go in a positive way.
Mm-hmm. Would you say that there's been more hate and narrow-mindedness, like in politics, in the world in the last 20 years than you witnessed beforehand?
I would say ever since probably the election between Bush and Al Gore. It's been such a crapshoot ever since then, but like within the last 16 years, it has just been worse and worse and worse. And then within the last 10 years, it's been amped up so much. It's just gotten to the point to where I blame social media for a lot of this too. We didn't have a voice back then. Like the internet was still in its infancy. Now everyone has a platform to get on there and share their opinions. And it's not necessarily a good or bad thing. It's kind of a double-edged sword because yes, it's nice to be able to have a communication with people and it's nice to let people have a voice, but some people shouldn't be using that voice because some of the things they say are pretty stupid.
Yeah, like that lady who accused me of worshiping demons because I have interest in Bigfoot.
Yes. Everything is a demon these days, though. That is the problem that I've noticed. Everything, it's a clickbait thing. Even with podcast, the big things right now are Nephilim, demons, and portals. For some reason, those are the big three things that get tossed around on so many different podcasts. And if people come on and talk about that on my show, I mean, that's up to them. Like I said, I don't do an agenda for the show, but I don't try and push a narrative one way or the other. And I feel like there's so many things out there that do. And if it works for them, that's cool. It's their show. I don't care what anyone else does. It doesn't bother me. Like, to each their own. But I don't do it for the clicks. So I'm just here to be here to do what I'm doing. If people listen, great. If they don't listen, that's whatever. So basically, I'm not a sellout.
The heart of masculinity is having an impact on the world around you. R.J. Rushton, he said, the greatest drive in man is not the sex drive, it's the drive to make a difference in the world. And that's the truth. That's the heart. That's why a person ought to start a business, to have an impact on his community, not to make money. That's the mindset of a greedy little pig. But to make an impact. Profit is necessary to continue making that impact. But that sense of, I'm going to do this because there's something to the core of who I am that wants to make an impact on the world around me. That is the definition of masculinity.
Mm-hmm. No, the misconception, and I was asked this earlier by someone, ironically, because of all the episodes I put out and this and that, everyone's like, oh, you must be loaded with money. I was like, do you realize, for over a year and a half, I was losing money? Like, there's no money in podcasting unless I'm getting over 1 million and something downloads a month, which at that rate, you're in the top 30 podcast out there or something. I'm not Joe Rogan or whoever else is rolling in it. So for me, it's just one of those things. Like I just do it. Like I'm not out here trying to. I have a good job. Like for me, this is just my thing I do at nighttime. I used to do play in a band. I used to do metal music stuff. So for me, like I don't do that anymore. So I needed almost like an outlet for something. I had all the equipment, so I do a podcast. I knew nothing about podcasting, and I jumped into it. So I've always said to people, I'm not even a podcaster. I was like, for some reason, I just felt compelled to do it, and here I am, 2 years later, and still doing it.
That's similar here. I didn't want to do the YouTube thing, and my son kept saying, well, it's just putting it out there in some format gets it out there. You don't have to even worry about competing with any of those people. Just get it out there. So I finally said, okay. And I make these little 3-minute long, basically 3-minute long videos just to make a point with some kind of sarcasm in it. And, but you know, worrying about, I've gotten hits that are up in the thousands, and I've got hits to where something's been up there for a year and it's got 30 views. So it doesn't matter. It's never going to be that 1 million view thing, and don't fret about it. Somebody will see it and it'll make a difference in their life, and that's the reason I do it.
Right. I feel like my show, I have videos on there, and based off the amount of subscribers I have on YouTube, I don't think likes me because I've been banned on there a few times. But there's certain words that get said that apparently are no words, and freedom of speech or having an opinion or something wasn't acceptable. One of the things that got me banned is they talked about, and I won't say what it was because it'll get me banned on this one. But basically, a prominent orange-colored person that is running for a major thing was the Antichrist. And I don't know why, but that got flagged and got me banned for a week because they said that. I was like, that is a little ridiculous because whatever.
It's ridiculous in so many ways that they're afraid of that being said is incredible. That 1988 came and went, and people are still. 1988 was the year that the rapture had to happen by, according to Hal Lindsey and stuff back in the 70s. He made millions off his book Late Great Planet Earth, and that was the heart of it. So in 1981, we were all thinking, it's about to happen. Well, it didn't. And there is no one person known as the Antichrist, and the belief in these things that are barely 100 years old, the views of a 7-year tribulation, the view of the Antichrist and the mark of the beast, and the way that's been viewed the last 100 years is actually harmful to people in two ways. Number one, it hinders the work the Christian people are wanting to do. And number two, it hinders them and keeps them stuck in their own immaturity. Nobody in history ever believed there was this great world leader called the Antichrist coming. They read the same verses and they didn't see it there till around the year 1900. So it's sad when you see that, but when I see it, I see both those things. I see it's ridiculous that they're responding to those comments. Let those comments play out, because people make themselves look foolish by saying it. If they're your adversary, let them talk their crap. They make themselves look stupid. But they're afraid, so they got to control the narrative.
I talked to someone last night. They're from Canada,
Mm-hmm.
and they do a whole lot of controlling the narratives up there. I had no idea how much they were involved with stuff like that, but yeah, it's definitely seems to be even more extreme than we have here. But I've never been to Canada. I've always heard it's great up there, but apparently after talking with him, it's like, well, maybe Canada's not as good as you think it is.
And they have weird stoplights. They have a flashing green, which is a precursor to a yellow on their stoplights.
Hmm.
Very strange.
I don't know if they have, I don't know if they have roundabouts, but for some reason in my area, just right outside of Indianapolis, is like the roundabout everything. And they claim it makes traffic easier. Yet no one apparently knows how to use the roundabout because I feel like it doesn't make anything easier. It's more confusing because no one knows when to go and when it's their turn to go. And if you're supposed to stop because there is no stop signs here, everyone just pulls out and there's more wrecks. I'm like, yeah, glad these roundabouts really made it easier for everyone.
I've seen them in the South more often in small cities about 4,000 people or so, or less. That's where I've seen more roundabouts down here, Mississippi, Western Tennessee, and stuff. It seems odd. I'd figure it'd be that's a big city type of traffic control thing. But
so this is on the outskirts of Indy, which the county is the richest county in Indiana. So it's in Hamilton County, and for some reason, it's like I don't know who's on their board of directors, but they must have a kickback from all these designers that make all the roundabouts because they're gung ho on having roundabouts. Every intersection, roundabout.
That gets
very
funky.
strange.
Yeah.
I've seen videos of someone going right into the roundabout, ramped and shot over. I don't think it was actually from here, but like the car was going wide open and it hit the roundabout and just ramped and launched itself. I was like, I'm sure that's going to happen at some point somewhere around here. People not paying attention. Is there anything else you would like to discuss?
No, nothing comes to mind at the moment except to kind of tie together some of the threads we've addressed. Social media, cell phones, email, texting. It's all convenient. What else was convenient was the candy the witch gave to Hansel and Gretel. That's it.
Words to think about. I'm guilty of the phone, I'm guilty of the social media, and I'm guilty of the emails because I literally have to do all that for work purposes. Yeah. If I didn't have a podcast at this point, and if I didn't have work obligations, I would be a hermit because I could care less about what goes on at this point. Like, I have my family. I could literally stay at home and do what I do on my own and not worry about what goes on outside of my own little bubble.
Mm-hmm.
But we live in a world to where we all have bills to pay. So I can't have it that way right now.
Well, that's the trap we're in. But we can think in terms of what to do to build the kind of civilization we would wish, because every day we live today, we live for our great-grandchildren. Our difference can be felt 500 years into the future. But it won't if we're all about feeding ourselves with every convenient thing. And we start from where we are. This is the world we live in, and we have to do work, and we have to engage in ways we don't want to. We'd rather not, but this is where we are.
Mm-hmm.
And Lawrence of Arabia, 1,000 years ago, said, in a land of mendacity, only a liar speaks truth. And it took me a long time to figure out what in the world he was talking about. But you got to deal with things where they are, as they are. You can't wish them to be something else. But it's okay. You put your hands to the dirt that's in front of you, and the dirt just happens to involve email and cell phones and whatever. And you build toward a day when when we got something better where we don't have to have all that.
We've made life to be convenient.
Yep.
And for a lot of the convenience, I go to the stores these days, and I don't even go to a checkout to where there's a person working. I'd rather just go to the self-checkout because it's a lot more convenient for me just to ring up stuff rather than wait into a line and deal with a human. I'd rather not do any of that. So I just go to the self-checkouts, ring myself up, and then leave.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's my anti-socialism or what, but for me, that's just, I guess I do look for the convenient way of going about it, but at the same time, it's like I don't want to wait in line for something. I'm buying two things. So I think that's just human nature at this point, is look for the convenient way, the easiest way, and we just roll with it.
Well, to get what
Well, I
we
mean-
want, we got to let go. At large, we got to work toward that end of you eat food that's good for you, because if you eat all the food that's convenient, you end up being a diabetic.
Right.
And it's the same principle, TV shows and everything else.
So basically, for the audience out there, you guys need to reflect on this. I lost my train of thought on that one. I had a point to make, and then it wasn't convenient enough for me, so I lost that train of thought. Well, Bob, it's been a pleasure talking to you.
You too, man. I will be listening to more of your shows, and it was good talking to you, man.
And that's the show, everyone. I really hope you guys enjoyed the conversations. If you would like to be a guest on Tinfoil Tales, remember to send an email to tinfoiltalespodcast@gmail.com or go to the contact section of tinfoiltales.com. Just get your message to me. We'll get something scheduled for a future episode. And just remember, the truth lies in the stories we share, the connections we make. Stay curious, stay open-minded. Thank you all for joining us on this journey. And until next time, keep questioning, keep seeking, and keep exploring the unknown. Good night, everyone.
Tinfoil Tales in the headphones. Yeah, it's time to rock. Got a story about a cryptid creature. Let's take a walk. Bigfoot, dogman, they're out there in the dark, but the truth is out there like an alien spark. UFO sightings got the whole world shook. Conspiracies unfold like a story in a book. Media control, trying to keep us blind, but I won't be fooled, gonna use my own mind. In history, they don't want us to know the secrets they hide, the truth they won't show. Dominant of society, they keep us in chains. But I'm standing tall, it's time to break the reins. Lose control, trying to keep us blind, but I won't be fooled, gonna use my own mind. In history,